there's so much chat going on right now. Somebody dropped a comment earlier about how they wished games would just release with the full game on a disc instead of having you download stuff. That's unrealistic in today's day and age. Patches alone are gigabytes of information. The smallest patch size these days can be 8 to 10 gigs. It's just not realistic to do physical editions of games anymore. This goes back to this will be a slight discussion for a minute. This goes back to the discussion of why PC games are so often plagued by issues when a game does a multi-platform launch, and they'll have like a PS5 edition, an Xbox Series X edition, and the PC edition. Xbox and PlayStation editions of the game will be fine. PC editions of the games will be plagued with all sorts of problems, and you'll have some big YouTuber who will make a comment. He'll make a post about how the game is broken, it's a piece of garbage, don't buy it, because he's having issues or she is having issues. When it really comes down to, there are millions of combinations of chipsets, GPU sets, driver sets, etc. that make up all of these combinations. Different people are using different power supplies, different off-brand controllers, different everything, right? And so a company cannot, no matter how big they are, they cannot account for all of those variations, which is why it is a physical impossibility with games that are as complex as the modern games that we play, physically impossible for a company to accommodate every single person out there. When you have this guy with Windows 7, this guy with Windows 11, this guy with Windows 10, this guy with Mac, this guy with Linux, this guy with a 10-year-old driver, this guy with an 8-year-old driver, this guy with a 2-year-old driver, this guy who refuses to update for whatever reason because his controller doesn't work with the power source, which doesn't match his RAM set, so he's never upgraded his game or his drivers or his Windows edition, or he's running a pirated version of Windows, or whatever the case might be. There are all these millions of reasons that PC games can have problems, as opposed to a console game which has one console for everyone, one edition for everyone. And so the reason games can't release on physical media, where it's just a game on a disc and no patches ever, is because of those reasons. Like, it's a physical impossibility to have these massive games that are 250 gigabytes or whatever release and not need to patch them at some point down the road. So this is why it's completely unrealistic to want companies to go back to the good old days when they used to just ship a box and everything was in the box and you never needed a patch and you never needed anything that was you never needed anything other than was on the disc. Those days are gone, guys. Like, that was back in the days when games were 15 megabytes. Like, games today are like infinitely more complex than the games of 10 years ago, let alone 15, 20 years ago. So the days of a game launching in a box with a disc and that was it, that's all we ever needed was the disc, that's done. Like, those days are long gone. And we will never get back to that. Every game these days has an online component too. We're expected to be online and patch. You know, patches are 100% worth it for sure. Not every game is rushed because of shareholders and publishers. That's also a sort of I'm going to push back on that just a little bit because I've spent 10 years working in game dev. It rarely has anything to do with a game being rushed because of shareholders and publishers, and everything to do with the millions of individual combinations of chipsets, GPU sets, driver sets, Windows editions, operating systems. That's an impossibility. We've talked about this before in other videos where Baldur's Gate 3 spent 3 years in early access. 3 years in early access with millions of players playtesting that early access edition. The game launches out of early access and is an amazing game, but Go read the patch notes that came 1 month after the launch of Baldur's Gate 3. There was more than 1,000 fixes in the first patch for Baldur's Gate 3. And they then proceeded to fix thousands of additional bugs through the subsequent patches. Why were there 1,000 bugs that needed to be fixed after 3 years of early access and millions of players testing your product? Because even though you had millions of players play testing your product in early access, there's a big difference between 1 million players play testing your product and 15 million players buying your product and playing it in the wild. Suddenly the number of things that can go wrong goes up dramatically. Not every company can do an early access like Baldur's Gate 3. Many companies have an internal testing pool. Let's say it's 100,000 people. Let's say they do open alpha or open beta weekends, and they get 100,000 people to come play their game on an open beta weekend. And they collect a ton of data, and they find a ton of bugs from those 100,000 players. That's amazing. That's awesome. That's credible. That's the way to do it. But then they launch, and day one sales, 3 million sales on day one. The bugs that those 100,000 players found are nowhere near the amount of bugs that are going to be found by 3 million players playtesting across 3 million variants of chipsets, driver sets, operating systems, off-brand controller sets, power supplies, and etc. that PC gamers have around the world. So it is extremely... It's very easy to say it's the fault of the shareholders and publishers that games get rushed to launch, and then they have bugs when they're out. That's just not true in 90% of cases. Are there cases when shareholders and publishers want to push a product out because they need to start making money? Absolutely. But this is why I say a lot of people who make those statements have never worked in game development, is because I can tell you there is a point where you have to push a product out, even if it's not 100% ready, because payroll and people's jobs are depending on it. The Stalker 2 developers are a perfect example of this. They knew AI, they knew the A-Life or whatever it was called, they knew that wasn't working, but they said, our developers have been working under wartime conditions, we've made them move countries, we've been suffering, we're 2 years late, we have to push the product out the door. Because we literally cannot afford to push it again. We cannot afford to push the launch again. We have got to get a product out the door. We have to make payroll. We need to get these people's salaries paid. We need to push the product, even though it will have bugs at launch. Now, it's easy to lay the blame on the publishers and the shareholders and say, yeah, but Cyberpunk, look at the Cyberpunk launch. Sure, that's a unicorn example of investors pushing for something, but there's also a reality of a studio having an operating expense that has to be paid. It's not always about corporate greed. It's easy to lay the blame, at the feet of corporate greed, because that's an easy low-hanging fruit target. But I promise you, the reality is so far from that in most cases. Not every case. Most cases. It's anyway, I have to push back on that narrative when I see it pop up in chat, because it's just not true the vast majority of time. There are times when it is true, but not really. Not the vast majority of times. The reality is that games are big, games are complex. Right, JK, if you try to be perfect, you're never going to release a perfect product, ever. It's not possible. You could get a product really, really good, but I guarantee you, even if you have a game that's really polished, you're still going to have some guy out there who's running Windows 7 because he refuses to update, and he's running an off-brand $10 controller that he got from eBay or something, and he's going to load your game, and he's not going to be able to run it, and he's going to have issues, and he's going to yell about it and scream about it and call your game a buggy hot mess. And then his 20 friends who also run off-brand controllers and weird chipsets, and and then you've got the one guy with a 5090 who's like, this game should run like butter silk on my computer, and I've got choppy frame rates, and This game sucks. Why didn't the developers take the time to polish it? Rah! Who knows what power supply he's running or what combination of drivers and things that he's got, which is making his game not run even when it should run. And those are the reasons why companies have to patch. And for that reason, we're never going to go back to the days of getting everything on a disc that ships and then it's good to go. See ya. Have fun. Those days, I don't even think that's been a thing for 20 years. Like, I'm trying to think, when was the last game that I played that I didn't have to patch? Let's take a minute for me to think back on that. It probably would have been during... I want to say maybe Assassin's Creed 1, Halo 3. Like, that was back during, like, the Xbox 360 era, which is probably, like, back 2007, 2008. That's probably the last time I can think of that I didn't have to patch a game. That's 25 years ago, right? That was the last time I can think of not needing to patch a game. And I may be misremembering, and I did have to patch my games on the Xbox 360. I'm really hard-pressed to think about the last time I bought a game that I didn't need to patch. I mean, we live in the modern era where internet... Yeah, Baldur's Gate 1, Baldur's Gate 2. Like, yeah, I mean, we're literally in chat going back 25 years to find examples of games that we bought that we didn't have to patch. Like, I feel like that should be a conversation that needs to die out. Why don't we just ship games anymore? They just come in a box and then that's the only thing we need. Like, come on, guys. It hasn't been like that for 25 years. I'm assuming everybody, you know, those people want to go back to Nokia, like brick Nokia phones too, that didn't have a touch screen. I'm exaggerating for the sake of entertainment this morning, everybody.